Bien, bonjour à toutes et tous. Nous allons démarrer cette séance d'ouverture du 5e Forum européen. Et c'est avec un immense plaisir que j'ouvre cette 5e édition du Forum européen des forces de gauche vertes et progressistes. Nous continuons de vivre, et on le sent, si je puis dire, malheureusement en ce moment, au cœur d'une crise sanitaire et sociale provoquée par la pandémie du Covid-19 qui n'en finit pas de bousculer nos vies. Nous sommes extrêmement heureux de nous retrouver aujourd'hui en partie en présentiel, puisqu'une partie des participants peuvent être ici aujourd'hui, d'autres sont en ligne, et d'ailleurs je salue tous ceux qui nous suivent en ligne, mais c'est toujours plus agréable que le forum que nous avions été contraints de faire entièrement en ligne l'année passée. Je demande quand même à tous les participants qui sont dans la salle d'essayer de rester vigilants, de garder à l'intérieur autant que possible le masque, même si les orateurs à la tribune, comme nous sommes un peu loin, sommes dispensés de le porter quand nous allons intervenir, mais dans la mesure du possible et en circulant, évidemment, chacun est invité à porter le masque. Vous avez de la traduction, je pense que tout le monde a compris maintenant. Le canal 1 est en français, le canal 2 en anglais et le canal...
Channel 2 for English and Channel 3 for Spanish. Before giving the floor to our guests and keynote speakers, I would like to share a few words with you. We face this pandemic with its consequences, social, economic, health-related consequences. We now live in this world dominating
notre travail en commun, nos solidarités.
So we have to show solidarity to have a new European development model for the future of the planet. With time, the forum has become a space where left-wing forces, green forces, progressive forces, social forces, trade unions can exchange. European members of parliament, left-wing forces coming from different continents can gather. And I hope that this new edition will be able to strengthen those collaborations. The Sao Paulo Forum has 30 years of experience. We are a young European forum, but I know that our activities are very useful. So as you can imagine, in the run-up to this plenary session, 7 online workshops were organized with more or less 40 keynote speakers in those preparatory workshops. And I know that you will receive the written minutes of those workshops. They have been able to address a wide array of issues. We have a high number of participants either present here or registered online, coming from 200 organizations, 50 countries are represented. I would like to greet our guests who will open this European forum. They will ask questions, and this is what we have asked them. They will raise the issues related to the main challenges that we will have to face in the future. I will introduce them in a while. And I would like to highlight the wonderful panel that we have today. And I think that our panelists represent a symbol. So thank you very much to you, Jeremy Corbyn, a former Labour Party leader. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Yes, of course, we can give him a big round of applause. Thank you very much to you, Dorothy Guerrero of the Global Justice Now. I know that you are fighting, namely in the framework of the recent COP26 that took place in Glasgow. Thank you very much to Chloé Meulewaeter, representing the International Peace Bureau. And I know that the General Assembly took place in Barcelona not so long ago. And thank you very much to Monica Valente, Executive Secretary of the Sao Paulo Forum. I know that you are one of our key partners in this forum. And thank you also to two participants who will join us in a video. Yolanda Diaz, who is the Spanish Labor Ministry. She will deliver her speech in a video, as well as Luca Visentini, the Secretary General of the ETUC. He will be able to take the floor later. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. And I think that this is an excellent panel that we have. Before giving the floor to each one of our guests, I would like to share with you a few additional words, simply to share with you some ideas inspired by my position in the European Left Party. Of course, we do not have a lot of time for each speaker, so I will be quite concise. I simply would like to share with you some key ideas. We do not only want to be a forum of exchange, a space of exchange. We would like to inspire the common action, because we would like to change the situation in Europe. So very shortly, I would like to share with you three ideas. First and foremost, I believe that we need to be forces working on the convergence of all of those fights in the environmental dimension, in the social dimension. We know that we shouldn't take this for granted, because the way men, women, and nature are exploited by the capitalistic predators, by the way they work on resources, the aim is always to divide, to make them feel guilty, to isolate them, to oppose them. So convergence is not a natural thing. Of course, we know that we have to face so many issues at the same time. We know that our life on Earth is threatened, and we have seen the very weak messages coming out of the COP26, and this is terrible. We are threatened in a way by the precarious way of living, by education, work, by this crazy merchandisation of the way we live. And of course, we have the pandemic with its toll on so many lives. And we know that those limiting health expenditures are the same ones who do not want to invest enough means to fight climate change. We will not be able to achieve a fair climate transition against the forces of work, but together with the workers who should also plan those democratic, social, environmental transitions towards a new way of production. We have to be forces acting together constantly in a united way with the trade union, so that we can go beyond the current system. This could really be the red thread of our work. A second idea that I would like to share with you. This transition, which is actually a revolution of civilization, will require huge means. We know that we will have to mobilize hundreds of billions of euros in funding. We will not be able to protect our planet and workers, and we will not be able to protect those crazy high levels of dividends. We know that the 2008 financial crisis was paid by all Europeans, by all European citizens, and we know how much the pandemic is costing us. So we need to change those rules. The pandemic has obliged European leaders to suspend the budgetary pact and to resort to the European Central Bank. But from 2023 onwards, the idea would be to go back to those unfair austerity measures that are totally ill-adapted to the future. Some call this the return to normality, but actually it would mean that we would go back to an absurd situation. I believe that we need to launch a joint campaign based on convergence to replace those austerity rules that crushed us. We have to find new rules. We need a new environmental and social pact in which the monetary creation would be mobilized to achieve those green environmental objectives. So this is a second idea that I wanted to share with you. So it's a no to the return to austerity measures, such as the ones we have known before the pandemic, but we need to work on solidarity. And then a third idea that I would like to share with you. Now that we face this huge crisis, now that we see that there is a rejection from European citizens, we clearly see that there are now the worst political reflexes all over Europe. We see now those nationalistic rivalries between powers, hatred, xenophobia, racism, these anti-migrant movements, gender-based violence. So it is a kind of war, so to say. Everywhere we see that the extreme right is becoming a potential solution or a part of a potential solution to those problems. So I think that it's paramount to work on peace, to work on solidarity, on human brotherhood. This is the main fight that we have to embark upon to achieve all those objectives. I think that what we need is a global agenda for peace, for collective security, for brotherhood. Otherwise, we see all those sources of conflicts. Well, they could deteriorate and they could really worsen. We clearly see that Europe is a powder keg in which racism could spark a human disaster. So this is a global agenda that needs to encompass all current issues. We know that there are still pending conflicts in Europe. I have in mind Cyprus with the Turkish occupation. I have in mind the autonomy of Ireland, the situation in the Balkans, the Kurd people as well. I also believe that on the agenda, we also have to address migration. This is unbearable. This is just unbearable. And Europe should be ashamed to see what is happening with migrants. Everywhere in the east, in the south, in the west, with those who lost lives in the channel. This is not acceptable. So I believe that we need to fight extreme rights. We need to fight for our rights. We need to fight for the defense of women's rights everywhere in Europe. And we clearly see here and there some emancipation movements. And then I believe that we need to fight for disarmament. We see an increase in armament expenditures. We see an increase in the defense expenditures. And there again, we need to do something about that. We see what is going on in Africa. We need a new disarmament, peace and security treaty in Europe. So, of course, those are many ideas, but I was willing to share those ideas with you. They are not the only ones. Obviously, we are going to listen to other ideas. We'll have the possibility to have thorough debates. And as we did in the past editions, we will end up this forum with a final statement and a working plan for the forthcoming years. So this is in a nutshell what I was willing to share with you as an introduction to this forum, which I hope will be successful. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dorothy Guerrero, So, as I told you that you have 7 minutes. I know that this is very short and it's very complicated, but I am sure that we can meet this challenge and we will have the opportunity to continue with the debate. So, Dorothy Guerrero, you are a member of the Global Justice Now. You have been involved in the preparation of the COP26 in Glasgow. Dorothy, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It helped a lot, actually, to guide us in what we were about to say. And good afternoon. Hello, everybody. And it's a great honor for me to be here and join you in this very important forum. In our preparation, so Global Justice Now is part of the COP26 coalition. I'm in the coordinating committee. And a year before that, we were already worried that because of the pandemic, a lot of the participants, delegates, and as well as civil society observers and activists who wanted to mobilize to COP26 will find it difficult to come to the UK and go to the COP26. And what happened actually showed a very stark reality that those that are also suffering from vaccine apartheid are the very countries who are already on the sharp edge of climate crisis could not even come to the UK to that important discussion to raise their voices and also demand change, because they could not simply go there. So 2/3 of the people that we tried to help to attend that forum were not able to go there. And then those who managed to jump so many hoops to be able to be there were faced also with the reality that on important meetings like the Leaders Summit, we were given 4 tickets for all the environmental NGOs, 2 constituencies with more than 1,000 organizations to represent us. So a lot of people who risk their health coming and traveling from far, were told, follow the discussion online from your hotel. So this COP26 was not my first COP. It was my 7th since 2007. And but this is the first time that I'm on the organizing a group, and also here in Europe. I'm originally from the Philippines, and in the last 6 COPs, I attended trying to put in the agenda of the radical Southern voices and Southern communities. So that example of the fact that those who needed a voice in important fora and barred from doing so because of the vaccine apartheid, which is not natural. It is brought about by the recalcitrant nature of transnational corporations who don't want to share their formula, and at the same time aided by governments like the UK, many governments in the EU who back the agenda of transnational corporation to just continue having their profits, despite the fact that every day that the TRIPS waiver or the idea to give a waiver for the intellectual property rights to be opened and given in the time of a global pandemic, but being refused. Next week, there will be the World Trade Organization's ministerial conference in Geneva. And again, NGOs, Southern governments are trying to plead to the rich countries, give us a chance to live. In COP26, the Southern governments and activists were saying, give us a chance to live as well. So literally, the pandemic and the climate crisis are not just about health issues. It's not just about quarantine. It's not just about the fact that aid and donations of vaccines are not enough. It is the fact that we really need to change and rewire the global economy that put into reality or put in place this kind of situation where majority of the people will have no choice but to wait and dying while they're waiting for the mercy of the rich countries. But at the same time, what I saw in Glasgow was also hopeful. So in this grim scenario, there are some rays of hope. And that is the fact that people, despite the health pandemic, despite the cold and rain in Glasgow, more than 100,000 people were on the streets of Glasgow. More than 20,000 people were on the streets of London. I was told that in other cities, Bristol, Manchester, many other cities, there were thousands of people on the streets. And there were more than 100 mobilization and protests all over the globe. So it was a successful global day of action. Another idea or another thing that also gave me hope is the fact that people from all walks of life are also saying that we cannot solve the climate crisis by relying on the same power that brought or created it in the first place. So there's a sea change in thinking as well. Before, it's more of like how much reforms we can do. Now there are more young people, there are more activists who are saying it's the system, it's the economy, stupid. So, and this is becoming very popular. Also, the climate crisis is not just an environmental crisis. It lies on the back of the global trade rules, on the global investment rules, on the back of the aid politics that Europe is continuing to follow, on the backs of the financial system and the indebtedness of the global South. So the demand that was made clear in Glasgow was that the South do not need donations, the South do not need charity. Actually, we should start putting back the agenda of reparations. Reparations had been brought to the table in 2008 in Poznan, that's COP14. It was brought to the table in Copenhagen, that was COP15. But then it was silence after COP12 because people started to, or the recalcitrant northern countries were saying that let's not talk about, climate debt, let's not talk about reparations, because let's just talk about what is reality. So I think that is also another challenge. We are being told again and again what is realistic. When we all know if we wanted to be realistic, we have to demand what is seen as impossible at the moment. We have to demand and create that impossible. We also know that truth can also be through action. So we have to make our reality, we have to make new ideas and make that into reality. And the fact is, as what was mentioned earlier as well, the right is beating us to that game. They're creating false truths, they're creating new truths and presenting it as truths. So there's also a problem of democracy in Europe. And that problem of democracy, that crisis of democracy also came to the fore because of monopoly capitalism that seems to be unstoppable. So how do we reverse that challenge? How do we reverse it and say that people's movement, the people's agenda, the mobilization, the left ideas are the ones that are unstoppable because we will create our reality. So what do we want to happen? What do we see as possible and must happen and then also necessary? So we need significant changes in the world economy, as mentioned earlier. We need to change the asymmetry of power between corporations, state, and people. Because this reality is making human rights a mockery. It's making democracy a mockery. So we have to reverse that and put forward what is important for life. How do we reorganize our society and our economy? What is important so that we can fight for things that we love, so that we can put forward things that are useful and also beneficial to the many. So those are the big challenge. And I think at this point where there's already a lot of movements that are standing on the shoulders of previous movements, we are not actually reinventing the wheel here. There's a lot that we have seen from previous movement building, from previous organizing. There's all those ideas that were brought forward by socialism, by feminism, by indigenous knowledge in southern countries, by the youth movement. So how do we bring together the best of those ideas and put that into a better practice so that we can all move forward and say enough of the current status. We need change, and that is necessary and possible. So I think I will stop here, and I will look forward to many ideas in this whole weekend. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Dorothy, for your very determined intervention and also for sticking to your speaking time. I know it's not easy. It's not easy for anybody. I'm going to give the floor now to Jeremy Corbyn. We're delighted to have the honor to welcome you here. I think that your being the leader of Labour has been a major event for Europe and for the whole planet. So it's a great pleasure and an honor for us to welcome you here, and I give you the floor straight away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's an absolutely brilliant gathering of people from all over Europe, and I am very pleased to be part of that as a member of the left and the Labour Party in Britain, in the Socialist Campaign Group in our Parliament, and also a founder of the Project for Justice and Peace, which has already received the support of 50,000 people across the United Kingdom, both inside and outside the Labour Party. It is a method of bringing people together in common challenges and common struggles, and I see our participation here as absolutely part of that. And whilst Britain obviously is no longer a member of the European Union, as far as I'm concerned, the issues of solidarity between progressive movements in Britain and progressive movements all across Europe is exactly the same now as it was last year, the year before, and the year before that, and it will be the same as it is next year and succeeding years. We have to build that left unity all across this continent. Otherwise, the forces of the right will become much stronger. The COVID crisis has shown us just what inequality is all about. The poorest people in the poorest places lost the most lives. The poorest people in the poorest places lost the most in income. The poorest people in the poorest places in the world are still denied any access to vaccines or healthcare. It showed in stark terms just how unequal this world is when the vast majority of the poorest people around the world have no access to healthcare whatsoever, and Big Pharma is then rationing the supply of vaccinations in order to keep up an excessive price. This has to be a time for the taking into public ownership of the pharmaceuticals industry so that we don't pay through the nose for the healthcare that's been researched for by our national governments all around the world. This is a time for solidarity and democracy in the dealing of healthcare issues, not allowing even greater inequality to develop as a result of it. What I would also say is, from the point of view of the left, now I must say it's quite hard to set out a socialist vision in 7 minutes, but I'll do my very best. It is about our solidarity that we have to address on the fundamental issues that are facing people all across Europe and indeed all across the world. During the height of the COVID crisis, most governments involved themselves in a sort of interventionist economic strategy in which they were putting public money into the survival of industries and paying of wages, albeit wage reductions went with that. What we're now seeing is almost a universal application of austerity economics across Europe and indeed many other countries in the world. That austerity economics is not much different to the austerity economics that was imposed by the European Central Bank in 2008 onwards, when it sees the way out of this crisis as cutting public expenditure, allowing the gap between the richest and the poorest to grow, and at the same time attack living standards and oppose trade union organization. Today, we should send a message of solidarity to Amazon workers all over the world, taking action to try and gain trade union recognition and decent wages. So it is about economic solidarity, and Indeed, in Britain today, railway workers in London are taking strike action. Many others in local government and the health service are preparing to take strike action to defend jobs and defend conditions. And indeed, employers in Britain have adopted a horrible policy called fire and rehire, which means dismissing the entire workforce and then offering them the same job back on lower wages and worse conditions with less access to pensions. That is a strategy that's being followed all across Europe. We can unite on all of this because many of them are exactly the same companies doing exactly the same thing in each country all across Europe. So that means we have to work together in building that sense of solidarity. What I would also say is this. 2 days ago, 27 beautiful, innocent lives were lost in the Channel between France and Britain. Over the past years, thousands of lives have been lost in the Mediterranean. And in the past few weeks, 7 lives have been lost on the border between Belarus and Poland. Every country across Europe is constructing ever more elaborate barbed wire fences, electronic surveillance, new police forces, new tracking systems, all because of the alleged threat of refugees across Europe. And far-right politicians are exploiting this and saying to people all over Europe, refugees are a threat to your living standards. Yet the number of refugees in Europe compared to the rest of the world is actually quite small. Bangladesh hosts 1 million refugees from the conflict in Myanmar. Lebanon hosts many more refugees. Jordan does, Libya does, and many other countries in Africa, including Uganda and all across Latin America. And so this far-right rhetoric against refugees is basically racist rhetoric in order to divide people. I was very proud that last night in many towns across Britain, particularly coastal towns, they had vigils in memory of the 27 that had died. But yesterday in the British Parliament, the government announced it was going to work with France for a new means of trying to send refugees back and stop them traveling in the first place. People don't willingly put their lives at risk to go in a leaky boat in the sea. They do it out of desperation. Those refugees are victims of climate change, victims of poverty, victims of war. We on the left have to oppose this racist rhetoric and stand in solidarity with refugees and oppose to racism in all its forms all across this continent. Let that be a message that goes out today and this weekend from this wonderful meeting here in Brussels. The last point I want to make is this, that like a number of people here, I was in Glasgow last month for the COP, or this month for the COP conference. And whilst the outcome was, I'm being very kind here, very disappointing, and we could have done without a lecture from Jeff Bezos on preserving the environment, and quite a lot of other lectures we could have done without, actually. But it also brought together a lot of very interesting radical groups. I had some fascinating discussions with people from Brazil, both in the Amazon region and in Sao Paulo and Rio. I had fascinating discussions with the Indian farmers movement, and we should celebrate their amazing victory over the Indian government and free market economics in India. And so those discussions were wonderful because it showed that there is an environmentally sustainable way forward. That is a green industrial revolution where we invest in sustainable energy, we invest in renewable products, we invest in the future by providing everyone with a decent basic income in order to survive, rather than going into another round of free market growth in which we produce more and more disposable goods and doing more and more damage to our planet. These are very radical ideas, I know. But what is the left for if it's not about preserving the natural world and the environment and improving the living standards and life expectancy of all of the people on this planet? That surely is what we're about. So we have to be bold in our thinking, bold in our actions, and above all, bold in our acts of solidarity. And so what I would like to say is this. I hope we can come out of this weekend stronger and more united. whatever parties we happen to be in or whatever country we happen to come from. So we stand in solidarity with the victims of free market economics. We stand in solidarity against the neoliberal economics that's being imposed on so many people around the world. And in this very important cultural debate, we talk about the hopes and aspirations of young people within our world and within our societies. Because young people are now paying more for education, more for healthcare, are likely to get worse pensions in the future, and likely to have great difficulty in finding somewhere decent to live. There has to be something different, a youth manifesto in which we talk about redistribution of power and wealth so young people can have real hope and opportunity in this world. And it isn't just economic, it is also social, it's also creative, it's also artistic. That is surely what the strength of the left is. It's bread and roses as well. And this weekend, can we just send some messages of solidarity to people that are both having success, but also very hard up against it? Can we send a message to the people of Brazil and Lula in his campaign to return to the presidency? Can we send congratulations to the people of Bolivia for standing up against the right and re-electing the mass government? And can we send solidarity to the left in Chile, who are fighting a very important battle against the return of Pinochet-style economics and police activities in that country? There's so much that we have to do in solidarity with people all around the world. But if we allow ourselves to be divided by national frontiers, divided by the sort of rhetoric of the far right, and working class communities to suffer at the same time as austerity economics is imposed upon them, then we'll have been losing this chance. I know how difficult it is when you're up against the mainstream media and you're up against the establishment in your own country to try and put forward radical views. There is no home and no place other than the day-to-day struggle of the working class communities all across Europe and all across the world. That is what unites the left. That is what will unite us. And that is what will bring about real hope and change in this world. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Merci beaucoup, Jérémy.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I have to say that coming from France, yesterday we heard indecent words on the drama that took place in the Channel, and what you said is very warm to hear when I heard you say that we need to be united on both sides of the Channel to make sure that such an unacceptable drama never happens again. So we will now go down to the south of Europe, as we will now be listening to Yolanda Diaz, Spanish Labor Minister. Unfortunately, Yolanda was not able to join us today because she has a very busy agenda, and we understand that because the fight is difficult in Spain, as there is a very aggressive right, so it's not easy within the Spanish government. We know that Yolanda is a very busy minister, and we are very happy to be able to listen to her video speech, and you will be able to see her.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to address you in this 5th European Forum that unites democratic and green parties together with trade unions and social movements in order to reflect upon all those things that we need to advance. We need to have a better future. Facing fear, our main task is to be bold, to discuss the reasons of uncertainty, and to offer horizons of transformation that will give enthusiasm to the citizens that will give them certainty and calmness. We want to work to give hope to the citizens. We can't admit things as they are. And for this, we need a double task. We need to do several things at the same time. We need to transform today and imagine tomorrow what it will be like. But this is not a minor task. The reality is given to us by reason, and precisely for this, we need to leave abstractions and dogmas behind. And we need to focus ourselves in transforming the reality. We need to have material changes. Ideas are measured by their effects, their impacts, and behind this project we have a conviction, which is the common sense that is now being opened in this new political cycle, and we need to protect social majorities. We need to believe in a fair ecological transition that doesn't leave anyone behind and tackle climate change and climate crisis by defending social justice. Allow myself to dwell a bit more in detail. During the pandemic, we wanted to protect the citizens, but this has been very different to what we did in the crisis of 2008. We have changed this paradigm, and we need to protect our social shield and go back to the recovery plans. We always wanted to protect the citizens, and that's what we did when we saved more than 3,600,000 workers with the furlough programs and many companies. We managed to increase the minimum wage. But we need to look beyond the end of the month. We need to have a decent work to have a decent country. We want to look to the future. We want to protect our present, and that's what we do when we talk about innovation. I discussed this with Lula a couple of days ago, and I reclaim this now. We want to have a state that will be the leader of a fair transition, fighting against precariousness and inequality. Algorithms and artificial intelligence have come to stay, and now we need to put them at the service of the people, as we have done with the riders legislation that has been now a leader in the protection of labor rights. The ecological transition is also the present and the future. It is the only present that can make a future possible. I have seen this very much, and I have said this, but I repeat it once again. All policies are climate policies nowadays. We need to focus on climate change. This is our main challenge as humankind, and the basis is to understand that climate justice and social justice are two sides of the same coin. For this, we need to demand a European Green Deal that puts work in the core, that encourages sustainable growth, and that wants to have more and better democracies in our societies. In Portuguese and in Galician, we share a very difficult to translate concept, which is called saudade, some type of nostalgia. Many people have tried to translate this term, but I prefer to choose the one by Rafael Diaz, a Galician writer, who says that saudade means the anxiety of not arriving, but the will to continue. There is ever-growing pressure and tension between the past and the future, between uncertainty and hope. And facing paralysis and fear, I really believe in this type of feeling, this saudade, that will boost our task in the government, despite the difficulties and the barriers and the discrepancy between what is real and what is possible, and focusing on specific and ambitious goals. Thank you once again for your very kind invitation to participate at this 5th European Forum. I am convinced that these meeting points are essential to get closer and to understand each other. We cannot dissimulate our differences. We need to make them subject to the needs and demands of our citizens. We need to build the future. And this means that we need to make more bridges. Thank you.
Oui, je crois que Yolanda a raison de donner.
I believe that it's important to give a common sense to our fight and to do it in a sustainable way. It is true to say that we will have to keep on fighting and show persistence. This is really of the essence. Let's continue. Let's give the floor now to Chloé Meulewaeter. As I was saying, Chloé is a member of the International Peace Bureau. Well, this is maybe not the right name, but you will correct me if I'm wrong. And very recently, you attended a major congress, and I know that you will come back on this congress. So, Chloé, the floor is now yours. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. I do represent the IPB, the International Peace Bureau. It is an honor for me to be here. Now, saying that the world is at a crossroads of a possible destruction is true. We face so many crises. At the same time, we see the possibility of a new world based on sustainable peace that could be built thanks to the collaboration between states and social movements. So, as you said, in October, the IPB celebrated its second World Congress for Peace, the name of which was Let's Reimagine the World Based on Peace and Climate. This was an opportunity to strengthen the movement for peace, the commitment, and the organization of joint actions so that we can meet this objective of an injustice-free world, a world without pollution, a world without armament. We have adopted an action plan for 2023 and 2025, and I would like to address this action plan because I believe that it will allow us to face the challenges identified by IPB last month. It is based on an analysis conducted by peace organizations that attended the Congress, but also environmental, social movements, women's movements, indigenous movements, working to defend human rights. Well, I'm sorry, but most of the time I use Spanish because I work and live in Spanish. So actually my words are coming out in Spanish. Sorry for that. So, I would like to address our action plan. First, disarmament and the reduction of military expenditures. We believe that those issues should be addressed because without addressing those issues, we will not be able to move away from wars. And of course, we need this money to finance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We see a speeding up in the militarization of the world. Military expenditures are on the rise. And of course, this represents huge costs. If we take into account the latest data, the world military expenditures last year amounting to more than $2,000 billion last year. This is a huge amount. And if only we could achieve a 10% reduction, we calculated that we would be able to finance the SDG number 4, that is to say, universal education. To compare, we calculated that with 1% reduction of those global military expenditures, we could fund universal vaccination against COVID. So this gives you an idea of the scope of those opportunities that are missed, so to say, because we invested too much in military expenditures. So more than ever, we are advocating for a reduction in the military expenditures. This money should be rerouted towards education, health, and environmental transition. Second, We also believe that it's important to work for a world without nuclear weapons, because this is such a threat for mankind. IPB is asking all those states having the nuclear weapon to sign and ratify the treaty on the ban of nuclear weapons. Thirdly, the IPB is also working on this culture of peace, non-violence. We are against trading in weapons. We will attend the 2022 World Congress against armament, and IPB is also calling for a global and immediate ceasefire. And to quote the UN Secretary General, because we believe that this is an essential condition if we want to achieve a peace around the world. Fourth, collective security. This is an issue that is dear to our hearts. And in 2022, we will publish a report because we would like to address this concept. It is important to revisit this concept of security. Number 5, and I believe that this is not much talked about, the link between military operations on the one hand and climate change on the other. This issue should be addressed. It is unacceptable to see that states are not accountable for the greenhouse gases emissions derived from military activities. This is extremely important as an issue, so more than ever, we would like to see this collaboration between the environmental movement, the left-wing movements, so that the light is shed on this issue, the greenhouse gases emissions coming from military activities. Number 6, IPB is also supporting the new social contract pushed by the international trade unions. Of course, we need workers, because without them, it is impossible to have sustainable peace. And to conclude, the IPB would like to strengthen its link with the European left. At the next NATO summit that will take place in Madrid in June 2022, we hope to be able to share this message with the world leaders. We hope to share our message, our peaceful message on the consequences of NATO military activities. And obviously, we hope to be able to continue the collaboration. We know that there is a US military base in Ramstein. So we also believe that peace should be considered as a paramount topic for the European left. Peace in terms of demilitarization, in terms of disarmament, in terms of climate and social justice. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Chloé.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Chloé. This was a beautiful summary, a beautiful synthesis of all the types of convergence we try to achieve when facing world challenges. And of course, we will bear in mind this date that you have mentioned. This is the NATO summit taking place in Madrid in June 2022. This could be a very good opportunity for mobilization if we want to address disarmament. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Luca Visentini in a video intervention. Luca is the General Secretary of the ETUC. Luca attended a few days ago one of the preparatory workshops to our forum. This was a workshop bringing together trade unionists, European trade unions, addressing social challenges in Europe. And Luca, we are delighted to give you the floor in this opening ceremony of our 5th European Forum. Luca, the floor is now yours for a couple of minutes. And I know that you will be able to address the social challenges. And we know that trade union mobilization is on its way because we really wanted to focus on a new social protocol in Europe. We know that this theme is of the essence, and it's very often forgotten by European politicians. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pierre, and thank you very much to the European left for having invited me to address your forum. I'm really sorry I cannot be there with you. It would have been a great pleasure, of course, to be there in person, but unfortunately this is not possible for me today. I would like to thank the European left, first of all, for the great cooperation that we have built over the years with the European trade union movement. I think this is very precious for all of us to make sure that we can really achieve important, concrete results for people and working people in the moment when we face the challenges that we have in common. I would like to mention in the few minutes that I have some of the challenges that you also referred to and what we are trying to do to address these challenges, because it's clear that COVID is a tragedy and is not finished, by the way. But at the same time, COVID gave us also some opportunities to change concretely and radically the narrative that we have faced for too long in Europe, the narrative of austerity, neoliberalism, and the overpower of the corporation. So now we have the possibility to change. But of course, if we want to change, we need to have clear vision, clear strategies, and also capacity of mobilizing. The first point of concern for us as the trade union movement at the moment is, of course, health. And health means protection of health and safety for workers, workers that have continued working over all the lockdowns that have been at the forefront for defending the lives and possibility to continue for people to be part of the society. Health and safety means protection of health and safety for workers that now are returning back to work, but also the protection of health and safety for those that are continuing working from remote. But protection of health means also vaccination, of course. And there is a huge democratic challenge when it comes to vaccination. This has been referred also earlier on this afternoon. There is a need to a great action at the global level for the TRIPS waiver. We have the ministerial conference in a few days from now. We have to make sure that all social partners, civil society, trade unions, progressive movements, we mobilize to make sure that we can really achieve the TRIPS waiver and we can ensure to all countries in all continents real universal free access to vaccination. It's really a matter of democracy, a matter of human rights that we cannot disregard. The second element I wanted to mention is what kind of economic model are we going to build after the pandemic? We are facing yet another crisis. We cannot accept all this rhetoric that is spread around about the fact that we have to build a new normal. There is no normal to be built. The normal we have faced so far was horrible. The kind of economic model that was built was horrible. We have to radically change it. We need really to pave the path for a more sustainable, inclusive, and just economic model in Europe and also in the rest of the planet. But you know, to achieve this is not just about words, and it's not even just not just about mobilizing. It's about changing the policies, changing the rules of the global and European economy. We have a great opportunity at the moment because finally, after the pandemic, a discussion about changing the fiscal rules of the European Union has started. It's very important that trade unions and leftist and progressive forces really contribute to this discussion to push the decisions in the right direction. And we have also to make sure that the enormous amount of money that is available through the investment plans to rebuild our economy is used in a proper way this time. We cannot accept a recovery that is again jobless, where just precarious jobs are created and when we have still unemployment and inequalities on the rise. We have, on the contrary, this time to make sure that every single euro of public money that will be spent for the recovery plans will be transformed into quality job creation. This is for us a fundamental issue on which we are investing all our efforts to make sure we can succeed. And this, of course, is also linked to another fundamental element that is part of the economic model we want to build, that is fairness in redistribution of wealth, in increasing wages, in making sure that we can have upward convergence when it comes to people's incomes and people's working conditions. The third element is just transition. We have been all disappointed, of course, by the results of Glasgow, of COP26, but the trade union movement has been particularly disappointed about the fact that just transition and protection of workers in the transitions, while all this was almost barely mentioned in the conclusions of this conference. For us, just transition cannot be just and only offering some training courses or some social protection to those workers that are going to lose their jobs when the transition will come, is already happening, by the way. We are absolutely committing in addressing and achieving the objectives of the Green Deal and the Paris agreements, but at the same time, we have to make sure that, again, working people are not left behind. For this, we need massive investment for job creation. We need industrial plans, energy plans. We need to make sure that the money goes for job creation in those communities that are going to be affected by the climate and digital transition. And this requires important governance, requires social dialogue, requires collective bargaining, requires really the capacity to put communities, social partners, trade unions together to make sure that we can succeed. This means for us building a new social contract. A new social contract, again, cannot be just slogans. We have to make sure that we have new regulations in place. By the way, yesterday, the European Parliament has finally approved a very important mandate to negotiate on the directive of minimum wages and collective bargaining. For us, this is the most important piece of legislation that at the European level is going to be delivered for social rights in our continent. We have to make sure it succeeds, as we have to make sure that we will succeed also in having a directive that can protect platform workers, non-standard workers, make sure that the exploitation through bogus self-employment can really come to an end in Europe. Regulation, new legislation, stronger social protection systems, but also making sure that the European Pillar of Social Rights, its principles, become binding measures in the European Union, and that, and this is my last point, that we can make sure that we can have a social progress protocol being part of the treaties of the European Union. Social progress protocol, we mean that we need to rebalance the importance of social rights in comparison to economic freedoms. Too often in the European Union, economic freedoms have completely ruled out and destroyed social rights in our continent. This time, there is really a need for change. And this makes me come to my very, very last point, that is the emergency of democracy we are facing at the moment in the European Union and in the rest of the world. There are too many far-right and fascist forces that are coming to government and to power in many countries. We have seen also this kind of movements using violence to attack journalists, some categories of the population, discrimination, attacks even against the trade union movement. What has happened very recently in my own country, where fascist forces have attacked the premises of CGL, the biggest union in my country, is something that we cannot accept, something we have to fight against. No pasarán is really our fundamental slogan on this. We have all to mobilize for democracy, to defend democracy, and democracy is not just a formal value, a formal concept. Democracy lives in the economy, in the labor market, in the workplaces. We have to make sure that democracy lives also through social dialogue, collective bargaining, trade union power. These are the elements on which I'm sure we can continue our alliance, we can strengthen our cooperation, and together we can win. Thank you very much for your attention and for having invited me.
Merci beaucoup, Luca, et merci d'avoir été avec nous, même si c'était...
Thank you very much, Luca, and thank you for having joined us, even though it was through a video link. It was live, and I know what it means for you with your permanently very tight schedule. So, to wind up this opening session, I'm going to give the floor to a very dear friend of the European Forum, Monica Valente, the Executive Secretary of the Sao Paulo Forum. The Sao Paulo Forum has been one of our sources of inspiration in the creation of this European Forum. So, Monica, it's a pleasure for me to give you the floor now.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for your kind words. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the European Forum for the realization of this so important forum, gathering all the green, progressist, unionist, socialist, and left forces in Europe. This is a success. This event is a success after 5 years. I would like to thank as well very heartily to you, Pierre, Laurent, dear friend, as a coordinator of the European Forum, for this invitation for me to be here representing the Forum of Sao Paulo. For me, it's an honor to be an inspiration for you, and now I hope that you will inspire us to correct our mistakes and to have new inspirations to create a better world. I was certain that when I saw the panelists and the reflections made here, I'm sure that we will all learn a lot from the European Forum. Dear colleagues, I have to read a bit because Spanish is not my mother tongue. So to be able to organize my thoughts, I have to read some of my notes. The crisis provoked by the COVID worldwide clearly showed all the contradictions, the limitations, and the lacks of the neoliberalism as a very obvious and clear way, not just about the fight of the COVID, but also with regards to the rise of the inequalities in the world, the poverty, and the destruction of nature worldwide. As you know, the Forum of Sao Paulo, created in 1996 as an articulation of political parties and political movements, anti-liberal political parties, we were fighting for the creation of an alternative model, more inclusive and more sovereignty. And for us, is a crucial fight. We have to fight for the sovereignty of our lives. We have to fight against colonialism. We have to fight against dictatorships linked to the politics, and now we're fighting against neoliberalisms. Under this slogan, it is crucial that as Caribbean and Latin America and Europe, we have to strengthen our cooperation links and solidarity among all of us committed to the world with no inequalities, with social inclusion and peace. We know that in the Caribbean and Latin America, we were able to create this new world. But unfortunately, the neoliberal forces have authoritarian features, and they're impeding our progress. Some years ago, they were saying that the progressive wave in Latin America was over. But no, that's not the truth. We keep fighting, we keep resisting against blockade and economic sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela, for example. We kept fighting and resisting, and in some cases we're able to shift the situation in favor of the citizens, as very recently happened in Mexico, Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru. Nowadays, in December, we will have two very important fights. Firstly, in Honduras, where a Xiomara Castro, woman candidate with an alternative program, will be running for the elections in Honduras, and Jove Gabriel Boric in Chile, where we'll be running as well for the elections with a anti-liberal program as the result of a very strong social movement created in 2019. And unfortunately, in Chile, we will see to the fight against the far right. And in Brazil, as myself, I'm Brazilian, I'll say that the president of a far right will bring all the bad things. And you can see what Bolsonaro is already doing in Brazil with regards to the pandemic, the employment, social movements, and he brings hate among citizens, and he creates the destruction of our country with no protection whatsoever to nature, with no hope whatsoever for a better life. So that's why our dear colleague, President Lula, is the first one in the elections, and that's how we will be fighting in the elections 2022 to be able to fight the far right in Brazil, but also in Colombia. As I would like to say it, in Colombia, you will be accompanying the fight for peace, the fight for the human rights, the fight against the genocide of the social leaders that are assassinated day in, day out. We have a strong movement for the creation of an anti-liberal alternative for a popular and social democracy and their fight for human rights in that country. Let's imagine it's maybe one of the few countries who is part of the NATO, and if we are able to change the political direction in Colombia for 2022, that would be great. But we know as Latin Americans that we need a further fight to face these serious situations. But I believe that both Latin Americans and Europeans, we have very much common fights, and the synergy among our peoples, Latin America and Europe, to be able to change the world. And this is an important synergy that we have to keep on building. We have a strong base of synergies and good cooperation, but now we have to take a step forward. I was listening to all the debates, and we have common fights such as the sustainable development, inclusive development, protection of nature, the generation of the creation of better employment, social protection with health, education, social security policies, with a universal wage, a proposal that was created from the pandemic, the defense of the human rights, highlighting the fight for gender equality against xenophobia and racism. So among all these axes, all these proposals that we're facing, we can create all together a good synergy, a good cooperation that will be able to help Latin America and Europe to keep fighting. I strongly believe that with the cooperation, multilateralism, with sovereign and inclusive cooperation, with the solidarity among people and the importance for the fight for peace, we, Latin Americans, Caribbeans and Europeans, we will be able to be together and coordinated to be able to face all those obstacles as that we face as humankind. I strongly believe that we will all together be successful. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Muchas gracias, Mónica. Llegamos así al final de esta primera sesión introductoria, pero no hemos terminado por hoy. Tenemos ahora una sesión plenaria.
Thank you very much, Monica, for your intervention. We are reaching the end of this introductory session. We are going to move on to speak about economic and social challenges in this time of pandemic. But before we take a little break, I would like to thank once again our speakers, those who have been here physically with us and those who have been online. I said at the beginning, in order to introduce this opening session, that we had a panel that was really highly representative of our joint struggles. And I think that this opening session has fulfilled its promises. Of course, it's always a bit frustrating. We would like to have hours to talk about all this. Well, we'll have the whole forum, the remaining time of the forum. And, well, in any case, I would like to ask the participants in this roundtable to stand up so you can really applaud them. And we will express our happiness because of this, thanks to this very nice beginning of the forum. So let's say we take 15 minutes break so we can start our first plenary session. So a big hand for all of them. Please stand up, and thank you very much for your participation in this first opening session of the forum. Thank you, Pierre.